Howdy, hey, hi, and hello, everybody. Let's talk about skeletons. So, we're going to cover two organ systems today, skeletal system and muscular system, which you might go, that's not an organ system. Well, it's still a system in your body, so organ system it is. So here we have two of my friend skeletons here. This is Harold, this is Jeff, and they're displaying a couple different things for us. So Harold here, he's just hanging out, but on this I have outlined where the different bones are because they're a little bit harder to see when they're not painted in. And then on Jeff here, we have the different shapes of bones color-coded. So there's 4 types, as you might distinguish here, and that is short, long, flat, and irregular. So these green bones are going to be the irregular ones, which is going to be your spine, your pelvis, and your tailbone. On our flat bones, we're going to have our ribs, our scapula, or your shoulder blades, and our skull bones. Your long bones are going to be your arm bones, so you've got your humerus, that's the one that really hurts when you hit it on a table, you know, funny bone. Here we've got our radius and ulna. The radius is going to move, actually. It's going to move around the ulna when you rotate your arm, just like that. And then your leg bones, you have your femur. Everybody knows the femur. It is the biggest bone in the human body, and it's one of the most difficult to heal when it breaks. And then under there, we have our shin, the bones that are on your shin and your calf, you know, the lower leg bones. Here we have the tibia and fibula. So the fibula is going to be the smaller bone here. And I always remember that because fibula, fib, it's lying about being the bigger bone. So, fibula. And then our purple bones here, or our short bones, as well as right here. This one is the patella, otherwise commonly known as your kneecap. And then the other is your foot bones and your hand bones. So your wrist bones here, these are called your carpals. So if somebody says they've got carpal tunnel, it means there's some goofy stuff going on in here with their carpal bones. And then we have our metacarpals, which are going to be these 5 right here. And then we have our, might only be the 4 here. And then we have our phalanges, or your fingers. So if I were to overlay with this, we've got the carpals, and then we've got the phalanges. And then in your foot here, this is a 2-scale foot model. I think this one's actually a little bit bigger than my feet. We have the end of the tibia and fibula here, and we have our 7 tarsal bones. Instead of carpals, they're tarsals. So carpal hand, T, toes are on your feet, so tarsals. There's going to be 7 of these, as well as 7 carpals. There's going to be 1 in here that's a little bit harder to see from the other angles, but I assure you that there is 7. And then there's going to be your metatarsals. Your hands has the metacarpals. This one is going to have metatarsals. And then these are still called phalanges. Your toe bones are still going to be phalanges, just like your fingers. So they've got similar structure, just different widths and slightly different shapes. Put that one back on its stand here. That doesn't look too comfortable, does it? Let's see if I can tighten this so it's not as wobbly. Better to me. So, part of the bones, we've got our skulls. We've gone over our arm bones here. We'll come back to the vertebrae in a little bit here, but let's go over the skull bone next. So your skull is not one big bone. It's made up of several bones mended together by what's called a suture. Holds your skull bones together. So up front here, we have our frontal bone, just like we have the frontal part of our brain. You're going to see that a lot of these coincide. A lot of these places have the same names. So we have our frontal, we have our parietals. There's going to be 2 separate bones here. And then right under that, there's your temporal bone. Then we go back a little bit, and we have our occipital bone back here. Again, that's going to be just the back of your head there. You're going to hear the word foramen a few times today. That just means, in the simplest terms, it just means hole. So that means there's a hole in the bone there, something like that. So we're going to have our foramen magnum in the back of our skull, where our spinal cord is going to connect to the brain. So your foramen magnum, meaning it's the biggest one. In front here, we're going to go back to the front of the skull here, connecting to the temporal bone, coming across here, creating your cheekbones, is going to be the zygomatic arch. And then under that, you're going to have the maxilla, which is the upper jaw, and the mandible, which is the lower jaw. You've probably heard that one before. And there's also the nasal bone. While your nose is made up of elastic cartilage, there is the base of it, which does have a bone, and that's your nasal bone. There are 6 foramen on your face. That's right, there are 6 holes in the bone on your face. Supraorbitals, intraorbital, so orbital, orbs, eyes, supraorbital, to one of each of your eyes. Infraorbital, so infra, inferior, lower than your eyes, foramen, and then there's going to be 2 right here, which are your mental foramen. So that one doesn't quite have a ring to it for being on your mandible, but you could take M and M. Mental foramen are right down here, and this is how blood flow can occur through in and out of your skull. The sphenoid bone. I knew I was missing something. Right in front of your temporal bone, but before you get down here to your zygomatic bone, there's the sphenoid. And it's a pretty small one. It only covers about not much of your face, but it is still there. And then the word process in anatomy is going to mean that it's sticking off of something. So you have 2 processes on your face right around here. You have your sphenoid and your sphenoid process and your mastoid process. Your mastoid process is going to be the one that works with your jaw muscles. So it's going to connect from around here to make your jaw, help your jaw move up and down. There's multiple muscles to make it do that. And your sphenoid process, which kind of sticks out down here, and it stops your jawbone from going back too far. And on the base of your neck, at the very top of your neck, next to that magnum foramen, are going to be 2 bumps in the skull called your occipital condyles. I was right the first time. Occipital condyles, and those are just little rockers essentially that help you nod. Next we have I believe lastly, or second to lastly, we have our spine and ribs. So there are 3 different types of your vertebrae. The human body is going to have 24 vertebrae. There are cervical, neck vertebrae, thoracic, your mostly upper back vertebrae, and your lumbar vertebrae, which is going to be your lower back. There are 7 cervical vertebrae in almost every single mammal that we know of. There is a specific breed of pig that has 1 extra, which is absolutely crazy. But even a giraffe only has 7 cervical vertebrae throughout that entire long neck. There's only 7 vertebrae in that, which is absolutely insane. Same with horses, that's also a pretty big neck. Your dog, your cat, those are all going to have 7 cervical vertebrae. Then on humans, we have 12 thoracic vertebrae. That's going to be the most condensed area. You can see these spinous processes that stick out, so it's the part of your spine that you can feel when you reach back. Those are going to be your spinous processes. And then your lower part here, the lumbar vertebrae, there's only going to be 5 of those. And then under here we have our coccyx and sacrum. So it's like your tailbone, essentially. It's going to connect over here to your pelvis and hips and up through the spine. Reaching around here on the thoracic vertebrae, we have our ribs. We have 12 pairs of ribs, and 2 of those are going to be what we call floating ribs, meaning they don't attach up here to your sternum. These are the ribs that are most common and easy to break. These are these bottom 2 ribs right here. They're the smallest ones, but they still provide extra support. They're going to be more so in the back, because the whole point of the rib cage is to protect your vital organs, such as your heart, your lungs, and while your kidneys are not necessarily vital, they're still really important, and those are going to be protected back there as well. by those lower ribs. And then that's going to be good for spine and ribs. And oh yes, these are going to connect to your, that's not what I called it earlier, sternum. These are going to connect to your sternum, which has 3 different parts. This bottom part here is the xiphoid process. This up here part is the body, and then up at the very top is your manubrium. So 3 parts. And then up here are your collarbones, which are flat bones, as we can see. And then here we have the pelvis. This is a very funny mess of bones because your pelvis is not 1 bone. On each side, it is 3 bones fused together. So this big part here where your hip bones are going to stick out, that's the ilium. This next part here, that's going to house the outside, or the lateral part, if you will, of your ball and socket joint for your legs here. That's going to be the ischium. And then this inside part, that's going to just provide the rest of the structure that you need down there, is the pubis. So it's in the pubic region, it's in the middle of the body. So pubis, ischium, and ilium. Bam. I think that just about covers the human skeleton. Please let me know if I missed anything. Moving on from there.
Oh.
Last thing. We're gonna cram a lot into this video. So we're gonna go over the muscle systems real quick. So there are 3 types of muscles in your body. That is going to include skeletal muscle, which is the ones that you first think of when you think of muscles. It's the one that helps you move. So that's going to look more like this in a bundle. Then there's cardiac muscle. Your heart has its own type of muscle. And then there is smooth muscle, which is going to make up your organs like your intestines, your liver, and that sort of stuff. So one of the main differences between, say, the cardiac and skeletal and the smooth is these little stripes that they have, or what we call striations in anatomy. So the special thing about skeletal muscle is that it is multinucleated. So there's a whole bunch of nuclei in here, nucleus, pluraled, and all the cells kind of blur together into this thing. And the striations are the bands that keep these groups of skeletal muscle together. And in your body, say in your femur, these are going to be a lot longer, whereas in these muscles up here, like your jaw muscles, they're going to be a lot shorter. But these are still going to look very similar anywhere that you look in the body where there is skeletal muscle. It's the movement muscle. It's how you bend your fingers, how you chew, how I'm talking, how you move, everything. Cardiac muscle. This is very much a zoomed in model of your cardiac muscle. So these would be a lot more dense. The space in here is not that big, clearly, when it's in your muscles. But this is the most zoomed in way that I can make it to show you what your cardiac muscle looks like. And I think it's really neat. It's also got striations. And then the last type, as we said, is the smooth muscle. This is going to make up your internal organs, as well as, say, your esophagus. That's going to be smooth muscle, and it has no striations. These are going to have central nuclei, as well as and it's going to contract, expand, that sort of stuff. All right,